The world was shattered by the loss of John Lennon, but no one expected George Harrison's reaction. He was known as the quiet Beatle, but George's silence was never emptiness, it was depth, defiance, and brilliance in disguise. While the world danced to the Beatles' pop perfection, George was weaving something deeper, Indian mysticism, spiritual awakenings, and soul-stirring melodies that forever changed the band's sound. But George wasn't just the band's spiritual anchor, he was a paradox. A man chasing peace with a fire that sometimes burned too hot. He lived like a sage, but played like a rock god. And behind that calm smile, a rebel, a trickster, even toying with his own birth date just to make people question the story. This isn't just about George Harrison the Beatle, it's about the man who redefined fame, found meaning beyond the spotlight, and left a legacy more powerful than anyone realized, until now. The prank was so convincing, even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame updated their records, listing George Harrison's birthday as February 24th, all because of a fake hospital document he quietly slipped into the world. It was classic George, elusive, playful, and impossible to pin down. But long before he was rewriting history as a Beatle, George's story began with a mother and a melody. While pregnant, Louise Harrison would tune into Radio India, hoping the calming rhythms might shape her unborn child. Ironically, George's life would be anything but calm. For many, heartbreak leads to music, for George, it was the spark. In 1956, riding his bike through Liverpool, he heard Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel blasting from a nearby window. That sound stopped him in his tracks and ignited a fire that never went out. Guitars became his obsession. His mother, recognizing the hunger in her son, scraped together what would now be hundreds of dollars to buy him his very first one. From that moment on, George and that guitar were inseparable. By 1958, still just 15, George showed up to audition for a scrappy skiffle group called the Quarrymen. But there was one problem, and it nearly cost him everything. John Lennon thought he was too young. Too green. But luckily for George Harrison, Paul McCartney wasn't ready to let him slip away. Determined to give him a second chance, McCartney arranged another audition, this time in the most unexpected venue imaginable. Picture this, you're on a packed double-decker bus in Liverpool, maybe just heading to school or work. Suddenly, a teenager pulls out a guitar and absolutely shreds a rock and roll solo right there on the top deck. That teenager? George Harrison. It wasn't a studio, a stage, or even a garage, it was raw, public, and unforgettable. His fingers flew across the strings with such precision and passion, even Lennon had to admit, he had misjudged the kid. George had something real. That same year, the band, still known as the Quarrymen, recorded a homemade track featuring an original tune. The songwriting credit? McCartney, Harrison, McCartney. Long before Lennon-McCartney became the most iconic duo in music history, Harrison had quietly earned his place in the foundation. By 1960, they had a new name, the Beatles. But they were far from famous, just four hungry musicians grinding it out in Hamburg's grungy club scene. Their promoter, Alan Williams, had a wild idea: ship these British boys off to Germany, where the crowds were rough, the nights were long, and the real education in rock and roll was about to begin. Servicemen who were drunk and looking for babes and live rock and roll played marathon sets in dive bars ringed by strip joints. The Beatles were there. One biographer called this time in the Beatles' career apprenticeship in the underworld because they were acting like complete devils. First, their promoter sneaked them into West Germany without work permits. Then there was George, who was only 17 and too young to even be in the clubs they were playing in. If that wasn't bad enough, George had another much more embarrassing problem going on. Being the baby of the Beatles meant he had to deal with constant teasing about his looks. Being virgin when Harrison finally had his big moment, it was anything but romantic. The band's living space looked like Alcatraz, with bunk beds, a bare light bulb, and cinder blocks to make things even worse. When Harrison finished, Lennon-McCartney and drummer Pete Best were in the room and cheered and applauded. Too bad he was about to get the wrong kind of attention. Harrison may have become a man in Hamburg, but the German authorities didn't see it that way. After months of avoiding capture, he was caught all of a sudden. Because he was too young, probably because of a jealous club owner. His bandmates didn't last long. As a last act of defiance, they set a tire on fire at their old club, getting a one-way ticket home. It turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. They were all about to become much bigger. Within a year, they had a new manager named Brian Epstein, a new look, and their first single, Love Me Do, which was climbing the charts. But when Please Me came out in 1963, Beatlemania broke out, and privacy became a thing of the past. Wonderful news for Shy George. The British press, known for being very critical, put down their poison pens to gush over the Beatles. How bad was the craze? Journalists wrote whole articles about hard-hitting topics like Harrison trying his first avocado and his preference for egg sandwiches over caviar. The tabloids weren't looking for and tearing apart the Beatles, at least not yet. America was in a slump when the Beatles arrived in 1964, the country was still recovering from the civil rights movement. Britain was still mourning the death of John F. Kennedy, and no one knew if Beatle fever would spread to the United States. But Harrison was dealing with something much less fun. Being sick all the time because he was working too hard had made him sicker than ever, and this time it was even worse. Being sick as a dog in a strange country at the center of a cultural revolution is a crushing burden when you have a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Harrison was taken to the hospital after a doctor said, "This is a very sick boy." The band's manager went into a panic because Harrison's condition had to be kept secret from the constantly reporting press. The stakes could not have been higher. Harrison's sister Lou was the heavy hitter in this case. It took her a while to get past the skeptical security guard at George's hotel door, but with Lou's help and a big bag of medicine, Harrison made it to the stage. His temperature was still a scorching 104 degrees Fahrenheit, but the show's 73 million people who watched didn't notice anything. During the Beatles' 7+ years together, Harrison became a global superstar. He wasn't just famous, he was mega famous too. Unfortunately, fame doesn't make you less lonely. While Lennon and McCartney were busy making hits, they often ignored Harrison. As Harrison put it, "We're the Beatles, we've got the grooves, and you two are just watching." But when they did give him a chance to shine, he hit it out of the park with Here Comes the Sun. More often, Handle the Mic. George may have been lonely in the Beatles, but his love life was very different. In 1964, while filming A Hard Day's Night, he fell in love with 19-year-old model Pattie Boyd, who was playing a schoolgirl. She sat next to him at lunch and later told him she thought he was the most handsome man she'd ever met. Harrison, on the other hand, barely spoke, which made her think he was painfully shy. She couldn't have been more wrong. Old school mystery. Harrison barely talked to Boyd before he suddenly turned and, "Will you marry me?" He tried again after she laughed it off. "Will you have dinner with me tonight?" Boyd turned him down because she was busy with a boyfriend. Her friends called her crazy, and she dumped the guy 10 days later at a film photo shoot. That's when she got the chance to tell Harrison she was single, and the rest is rock and roll history. They got married in 1966, and while love may have sparked Harrison's creativity, it was acid that he and Lennon took that really set him off. Harrison made a deep connection with Eastern spirituality. For him, it was like going back to his days on Radio India. Suddenly, his guitar solos got more complicated, and he added Indian instruments, which changed the sound of the Beatles forever. By 1966's Rifle, Harrison was no longer the quiet Beatle, he was a fully developed songwriter. Harrison and Boyd lived a life that was decades ahead of its time. It wasn't all zen, though. While they were trying to find enlightenment, the authorities were looking for something else entirely. In March 1969, a sergeant with a grudge broke up the couple's peaceful life during a raid on their home. A sniffer dog allegedly found hash hidden in Harrison's shoe. That's when the Beatle and his wife were fingerprinted and charged with possession. That wasn't the whole story, though. It was going to be a long day for the couple. Most people would hide after getting caught, but not George and Barbara. Patty. That same night, they walked into a fancy party where Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon were talking to other people. George, who was scared of going to jail, saw an opportunity to get Snowdon to work with the police. But just as he was about to make his move, Patty stopped in her tracks when she saw her sister across the room offering the princess a joint. She rushed over and whispered a frantic warning just in time to avoid getting caught twice in one day, which wasn't on her list of things to do. You could call it irony, luck, or just another one of Harrison's strange conflicts. The police could have caught him for a lot worse than a little hash. Harrison's personal assistant, Chris O'Dell, saw that one minute he was a Hindu saint and the next he wanted to drink, party, and take coke. His spiritual side had its limits, too, like when he told a flight attendant to F off for interrupting his meditation. As things got worse with the Beatles and in his personal life, Harrison was about to face a whole new kind of karma. The Beatles' breakup wasn't caused by just one thing, it was a slow-motion train wreck. In the late 1960s, Harrison started hanging out with Bob Dylan and the band at Woodstock, and let's just say it opened his eyes. Unlike the Lennon-McCartney dictatorship he had known, these guys were a brotherhood with a one for all and all for one ethos. Suddenly, the anger Harrison had been holding back for years got a little more light. The making of the White Album, aka The Beatles, wasn't just tense, it was downright brutal. Throats of each other. Ringo quit for 2 weeks, leaving the rest of the band to stew. But despite the chaos, Harrison was writing more than ever. Maybe it was because he was in the band, or maybe it was just pure defiance. Either way, his songs weren't getting the love they deserved. Anyone who saw Peter Jackson's Doc Get Back can feel Harrison's pain, especially when McCartney accused him of vamping George. In retrospect, Harrison said, "It never came to blows, but I thought, what's the point of this? I'm getting out of here." It is clear that they are not the same as the Kardashians. Harrison also said that being filmed fighting made things a lot harder. When Harrison stormed off, Lennon Crewy suggested that they just swap Harrison with Eric Clapton. Harrison got a new confidence when he joined the band and had a back pocket full of songs. But after 5 tense days, he returned to the Beatles to finish the record just a few months later, on January 30, 1969. Harrison was only in his late 20s when they played their famous rooftop concert and released Let It Be. He thought he had his whole life ahead of him, but it was over. As he started his post-Beatles era, he was feeling good, free from London McCartney and with a bunch of solo songs, ready for a fresh start in his personal life. He had just bought Friar Park, a huge Victorian Gothic mansion with 25 bedrooms, a ballroom, and 20 acres of land west of London. Life at Friar Park was. Behind the walls of a fancy estate, Saltburn was a wild, drunk mess. Harrison's wife called it a madhouse and said the whole time was crazy. They lived without rules or obligations because they were high on drugs and alcohol. It may have rained at Friar Park, but Harrison still found time to make music, and not just any music. His epic triple record came out just a few months after the Beatles broke up, and fans were drawn in by how brilliant it was and the hidden messages. Harrison taking a picture with 4 garden gnomes. People went crazy when they saw the cover. The Washington Post called Melody Maker exalted Harrison, the real genius behind the Beatles. He is now free, and his album is the most successful one ever by an ex-Beatle. Harrison was having a great career year when he and Boyd were told the heartbreaking truth: there would be no little feet running through Friar Park. Boyd later said that realizing she couldn't have children was a very hard pill to swallow. To make matters worse, Harrison flatly refused to adopt, it was just not in his nature. One more crack in their already broken marriage. Being married to a rock star wasn't all fun and games, just ask Boyd. Despite her model looks and Harrison's so-called spiritual devotion, temptation was everywhere, and Harrison wasn't exactly fighting it. On a trip to India, Harrison became obsessed with the god Krishna, who was always surrounded by concubines. This made Harrison want to follow Krishna's lead, and he told Boyd that having all the other women in his life hurt him a lot. She spoke to him. Unfortunately for Boyd, she wasn't crazy, he was having an affair, and their marriage was about to fall apart. Boyd said that Harrison was high on cocaine, and Harrison said that it hardened his heart and froze his emotions. This is the only way to explain the affair that ended their marriage. At first, Boyd found pictures of Harrison and the other woman together, and the woman would come over to watch George play in the house. Studio Boyd wasn't stupid, and she had finally lost it. As if going out with Harrison's mistress wasn't bad enough, she was actually Maureen Starkley, Ringo's wife. When Boyd lost it, she screamed and stormed upstairs to the locked bedroom where they were. As she pounded on the door, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Harrison laughed when he finally opened the door. His excuse, "She's just a little tired, so she's lying down," was so unbelievable that it made her laugh. He flatly denied everything, which made Boyd do what she had to do. She went straight to Ringo and told him everything. Ringo's reaction was pure anger, but Harrison wasn't done making his so-called friend look bad just yet. The next night at a dinner party, no less, Harrison turned the tension up to 100. It was dead quiet when he told Ringo that he was in love with Maureen. Later, John Lennon would compare Harrison's deeds to a family member having an inappropriate relationship at a party to celebrate the start of the new year. Harrison asked for a divorce in 1974. If you look at what happens next, you might wonder if karma is real. Harrison wasn't always on fire, but when he wasn't, the Dark Horse Tour of 1974 was a train wreck that left fans confused. He filled the set list with Indian music and messed up Beatles classics by changing the lyrics. To make matters worse, he croaked his way through a bad case of laryngitis. Sadly, this was just the start of Harrison's health problems. Whatever it was, Harrison's next great love seemed to be written in the stars. While he was still married to Boyd, an astrologer told him that a dark-haired woman would soon change his life. Olivia Aris, a 26-year-old American working at his record label, was exactly the type of woman he was looking for. They got married in 1978, just 1 month after she gave birth to his only child. Harrison was known for being rude, remember the dinner party, but after John Lennon's brutal death, he was incredibly cold. While the world was shocked, Harrison said that his wife woke him up. He turned over and went back to sleep, and when I woke up, it was still true. As if that wasn't bad enough, Harrison's words would soon haunt him from beyond the grave. The death of Lennon wasn't just a tragedy, it was the final nail in the coffin for any hope of a Beatles reunion. He become long past the wound nonetheless lingered in one in every of his final interviews. Lennon brushed off his antique bandmate as a bitter younger follower who bears resentment for me being the father who left home Zen warrior that he become. Harrison didn't lash out. He wrote a tribute all those years ago honored Lennon. However, one lyric stood out: I continually seemed up to you candy farewell, or a subtle clapback just like George to maintain us guessing even to the very quick. You do not want eagle eyes to observe that Harrison often puffed on most cancer sticks in plenty of documentary pictures, and for that he paid the rate in 1977 whilst gardening at Friar Park. He discovered a lump, medical doctors eliminated it and gave him the all clear. Disaster prevented proper. He might have thought so until one night while his worst nightmare got here crashing via the front door. Harrison and his spouse were spending a quiet night time at Friar Park on December 30, 1999 until terror came storming in. A deranged intruder broke into their home on a twisted venture armed with a kitchen blade and an unhinged obsession. He launched a frenzied attack, plunging the blade into George over 40 instances. His younger wife burst into the chaos and went complete movement hero. Grabbing a fireplace poker, she unleashed her fury on the 34-year antique attacker, taking him down and saving Harrison's lifestyles. Harrison may have joked about the attack, however the brutal ordeal left its mark. On November 29, 2001, surrounded by his cherished ones, he let pass, and while he did something fantastic occurred in line with Olivia. There has been a profound